Well, hello there, fellow traveler. How would you like to join me as I create a few different variations of a Game Master screen? If you're interested in seeing how I made this and what I learned along the way, then grab your tools and follow me as we level up our crafting. Hello, my name is Tom Tobar and welcome to Level Up Crafting. I love custom-made Game Master screens, especially ones that are made from wood. In my opinion, wood screens just look so much better than the standard printed ones that you can find online. Custom Game Master screens, however, can be a lot of money if you buy them online, which is why I set out to build my very own screens, and I'm pretty happy with the results. I was able to make 2 full Game Master screens for around $109 using some basic woodworking tools and a cheap laser printer. Now, I understand, a laser printer is outside the budget for some people, but not to worry. You can achieve a very similar result using an inkjet printer and some transfer paper. With this method, you can create the same 2 screens for around $75. In this video, I wanted to try out a number of different techniques and variations so you'd be able to follow along and make the right Game Master screen for yourself. For all my designs, I'll be using art from an Etsy store called LouteCrea. I really hope I said that right. She has a number of really amazing fantasy art that's available online that is perfect for Game Master screens. All the art that I'm using in this video is from her store, and all but one of the images that I'm using can be purchased from one single pack that's currently on sale on her site for $20. I highly suggest checking out this amazing artist online and following the links that are provided in the description of this video. Now, I'm in no way being sponsored by this artist. As a matter of fact, this is just the art that I selected when making selections for my own Game Master screen. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get ourselves started. Let's get started by making some design choices. The first step you need to decide on is the size of screen that you want to use. Both length, width, and depth. This has everything to do with preference. Many standard Game Master screens can range from 9 to 12 inches tall, and the width can range from anywhere from a little under 3 feet to around 4.5 feet wide. In this video, I'll be creating 3 Game Master screens because I had some extra wood. All the screens that I make are going to be 11.5 inches tall, but for the width, I made 2 of them at 3 feet wide and 1 of them at 4.5 feet wide. In the end, I found that the 3.5 foot wide screens worked just fine, but I really liked the 4.5 foot wide screens because it felt like it gave me just a bit of extra room behind the screen. Now I need to decide on the width of the wood. 2 of the screens I built were made from a 1/4 inch thick plywood. The issue that I found with this thickness of wood was not with the strength of the wood, which is what I thought, but with the hinges. I had to use very small hinges because I didn't want the screws to pop out the front of the screen. Because of this, I was not as happy as I should have been with the strength of these connections. In the end, it wasn't a deal breaker for me, but it is something to keep in mind. The last screen that I made was from 1/2 inch plywood. This thickness was my favorite, but you will pay a little bit extra more for the wood and it weighs a little bit more. In my store, it was like a $7 difference and the weight was not dramatic at all. Because of the strength of the hinges, I would direct you to the thicker wood, but either thickness is really a solid option. Once you settle with the size of the screen that you want to build, then it's time to go to your store and grab some wood. When you get to the store, find the Project Panels section. This is a simpler, smaller version of the much larger 4 foot by 8 foot versions of the same panels. When you get there, most of the panels in this section will be sold in 2 foot by 4 foot sections. A quick bit of math, and you can see that one of these panels can produce 2 screens. In all honesty, I suggest that you find a buddy and split the cost. That way each of you can walk away with your very own Game Master screens that look completely different. Once you get the wood home, it's time to rip the board in half to the correct height of your screen. For me, that was 11.5 inches. Then it's time to cut these screens down into the individual panels for your screen. I cut each of the center panels for each of my boards at 18 inches wide for the middle screens, and either 2 9-inch wide screens for the 3-foot version, or you can just cut another additional 2 screens at 18 inches wide for the 4.5-foot wide version of your screen. If you want to create the 4.5-foot wide screen, you're going to need to cut one of their panels slightly shorter so that the whole thing will fold correctly. You'll also need to use some scrap wood to create a raised shelf for the 2 non-shortened sides. As you can see, I added some scrap wood with a bit of glue and some clamps to both the middle panel and the longer panel. Because I did this, the smaller panel will be able to fit snugly inside, and the longer panel will be able to fold over the top of the shorter one. If I didn't do this, the second panel would not be able to close correctly. Once you have all of your panels cut correctly to the correct length, go ahead and grab those hinges and start putting your panels together. Stain is not a requirement, but I love the value that stain adds to any project. Simply wipe it on thickly and then wipe off any excess. Staining wood is an easy way to make a cheap project look amazing. With one nice thick coat of stain, I turned this plain wood into this amazing display. Now it's time to add a classy black border. I like to use bamboo strips for my border because they're already really strong and they're already a great size to use. Also, cutting down larger pieces of wood into smaller sizes can be treacherous at times. So if you don't know what you're doing, make sure to grab some of these bamboo strips that are in the description below. Start by measuring the sides of the screen and then tape the ends of the bamboo together before cutting them on your miter saw. Why use tape? Well, for one, it ensures that the lengths will all be the same. But more importantly, it makes sure that you don't blow out your wood when you start cutting it on a miter saw. Once all are cut to size, it's time to pull out your spray paint and paint them all black. Adding a black border makes your whole project look really classy and nice, and it hides any imperfections there might be in the wood. Once dry, it only takes a small layer of superglue to attach them to the stained panels. Superglue works almost immediately with skin and with wood, so keep this in mind when you're gluing up your strips in place. You could stop here and have a beautiful screen, but we're going to take this screen to the next level by using a laser cutter or ink printer. A laser cutter is an amazing tool to have in any shop. As I'm a beginner with laser cutting, I chose one of the cheapest ones on the market just to get myself started. This is the printer that I use, and it cost me around $219. This is not the best one on the market, and it's relatively weak. However, for my needs, it works just fine. If a laser printer is not in the cards for you, don't worry. Like I said before, you can actually get a very similar design if you use a regular inkjet printer and some transfer paper. If you would like to skip the laser cutting tutorial, then feel free to jump ahead in the next chapter of this video. When using a laser cutter, it's important to prep your files. For the most part, a laser cutter has 2 settings: cut and fill. Fill will burn an image into the wood like a black and white image would on paper. Cutting is the equivalent of using scissors to cut out a design on the paper. The first thing we want to do is tell the laser cutter what parts of the image we want to cut and what parts we want to fill. I'll be using an image editing software, Adobe Photoshop, to help me achieve this, but most image softwares should work. As you can see, I've loaded up the first piece of art I want to edit from LouteCrea's Etsy store into Adobe Photoshop. Next, I'm going to select the polygonal lasso tool so I can isolate the parts of the image that I want to send to the laser cutter. Once I have outlined the selection I want, I will right-click and select Layer via Copy. This will create a separate layer on the right-hand side in the Layers tab. Now I can select the eye icon on the layer below to hide it. The goal at this point is to create a file for the cut layer and for the file for the fill layer. To do this, I will right-click the squid image and select Duplicate Layer. Let's start working on the cut layer. Start by double-clicking the left mouse button to bring up the Layers Style tab. In this tab, select the Stroke button. This will add an outline to all parts of the image. I want this line to be thick so it creates a large border around the image, as well as fill in the small holes that will cause a problem for the laser. Now I select the paintbrush tool so I can fine-tune my cut layer by removing even more small holes from the image. Once complete, I should have two usable layers: the mostly black image for my cut file and the original squid image for my fill file. Now it's time to make my two separate files. First, I need to hide all the layers except the original squid image. Then I need to select File, Export, Quick Export as PNG. When I'm prompted to give a name for this file, I will call it Squid Burn. Now I need to do the exact same thing all over again for the mostly black image. This time, I'll call this file Squid Cut. With that out of the way, it's time to turn to my laser cutting software, LightBurn. Start by dragging and dropping the burn file into the LightBurn canvas. Then use the alignment to bottom left button. Don't worry about the image not being centered on the canvas yet. Next, right-click the image and select Trace Image. Now select OK to keep this selection. This will create a separate layer in the top right-hand corner bar. One is of the original image and the other is the traced image that we just selected. Now that the tracing is done, let's delete the original image. Now it's time to do the exact same thing for the cut file. Again, align the file to the bottom left-hand corner. As you can see, because the images were exactly the same, everything is lined up perfectly. Again, right-click and select Trace Image and hit OK. We want these two layers to have different settings, so I'm going to select the blue number 1 on the bottom left-hand corner to tell LightBurn I have a special laser setting for this outline. Now let's delete the image just like we did before. We should be left with the traced fill layer and the traced cut layer. Next, highlight both layers on the canvas and select Group to keep their positions locked together. Now we can rearrange the layers on the canvas to the bottom left-hand side and to the size that we need. It's always important to check your file with the Preview button. This will ensure that the laser will behave the way that you want it to. Always make sure that the burn file comes before your cutting file and use the settings for cutting and burning that are specific to your machine and the wood selection. Once everything is the way you want it to be, send your finished laser file to your laser printer and start her up. Laser printers and their setups can be a lot of work, but the finished product is always worth the effort you put into it. Adding some colorful art to a screen really looks amazing, and it's a lot easier than you might imagine. The only supplies you're going to need is an ink printer, transfer paper, and if you like vivid colors, then you might want to choose some paint medium. Start by grabbing some label making stickers. Now you're not going to be using the labels. Instead, you're interested in this shiny piece that's on the back that the stickers are attached to. Print your design backwards on this shiny side of the transfer paper. Then, take this over to your wood, being careful not to smudge the image. The ink is just sitting on the top of this transfer paper, waiting to be pressed into your wood. At this point, you have two options. You can press the ink directly into the wood and hold it in place with some tape. If you want some really vivid colors, however, I would suggest using a thin layer of paint medium onto the wood before pressing it in. Here is an example of with and without paint medium, so you can decide what is right for you. The most important thing you need to keep in mind is not to move the transfer paper while the ink is setting into the wood. You can apply some light pressure to the top while holding the paper steady with the other hand, then holding it down with a piece of tape while it sets and dries. After a few hours, about 4 or so, slowly remove the transfer paper and admire your handiwork. In the end, this project took me about a week to build, only because my laser printer takes forever to print. I hope this video has given you all the information that you need in order to build your very own Game Master screen for yourself. Let me know in the comments what you think about this project and what changes you would make for your own build. Also, let me know what project you'd like me to take on in my next video. Until then, I wish you the best of luck in all of your adventures, and I'll see you next time when we level up our crafting together.